Witchers, welcome back to the Witcher Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with Toasty. And Toasty, we've been talking about animes in the pre-show, but this episode has nothing to do with anime. Although the Witcher anime was pretty good. You know what? All the things that I noted about The Witcher, or about certain things that animes do that I don't like, didn't really happen in the Witcher anime.
It was a Western anime, Tom.
That's why it's better. So anyway, everyone's gonna know. Don't at me. Don't at me. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this in other circles. There are certain. I love certain things about animes, but there are certain things that really drive me nuts. Anyway, today's episode is about drowners. We've got another bestiary episode, so I'm excited about this. And drowners came up in our monster dating show too. So this is kind of a fun little segue.
So I did it because I was like, we've talked about every single monster that we talked about in the dating show except drowners. So I was like, you know what? Why not talk about drowners?
Yeah. So I don't know why anybody would want to not date a drowner. Except for that they're absolutely disgusting, terrible monsters.
Mm-hmm. But they're dead. They're dead things.
There's also that. Some people are into that. Oh God! Oh my God! Barf in my mouth. Okay,
let's not talk about that here, Tom. Please.
All right. Moving on. Let's talk about drowners. We got a little quote to start this out. Should I read the quote?
Go ahead.
Should I do it in a voice?
If you want, but there's other ones that you'll probably want to do in a voice later. Right. So maybe this one will go normal for now.
You let me know when I need to bring a voice in. Okay, this is the quote to start out. Drowners are scoundrels who ended their wicked lives in the water, drowned alive or thrown into deep water after death. They turn into vengeful creatures which stalk the inhabitants of coastal settlements. Yeah, so if this worked in the real world, then everybody that the mob sent to sleep with the fishes would turn into a drowner.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but that's kind of false though. So, drowners, also known as Muir de Iblin in Skellige or Vodniks, inhabit both natural and artificial bodies of water from rivers and lakes. We see in The Witcher 3 pretty often on the side of the river or whatever, to mill ponds and city sewers, which is a bit more prevalent in the older games, where you're in more urban areas more often. It is commonly thought that these creatures are drowned men somehow arisen from the dead to prey on the living. This opinion is as widespread as it is false, for the beasts are in fact another post-conjunction relic.
Oh, so they're not dead boys.
Yeah, they are. They're like necrophages, so they are dead boys, but they're kind of specifically a dead monster from another sphere that got dropped in. But I would make an argument just because you still get more of them. They still show up prevalently.
Right.
And I feel in my Witcher 3 playthrough, I probably single-handedly wiped out the entire drowner population, but they still show up. So they have to be replenished somehow.
Yeah. I feel like I killed hundreds of them. Where did they all come from?
I think I can't remember. Do they lay eggs? Do you see
drowner eggs?
I feel you see egg piles at all
in the drowner section. There are monsters that definitely have eggs. I don't remember the drowners having eggs.
I don't know. Can't remember. I know they have little piles, but I'm wondering if it's stuff in eggs or just random hordes of stuff,
or just a little hidey hole where they just kind of hang out or something.
Yeah, I don't know. They have to be replenished somehow. So I don't know.
It's a mystery.
Is one of and actually is probably considered one of the if not the most popular or common monster in The Witcher, and is one of those rare monsters that actually shows up in all three games.
Hey, look at that. We get to talk about all three games. All right, well, let's start with The Witcher 1.
All right. So Witcher 1, oddly enough, another thing about it is that normally they have a different classification in The Witcher 1 compared to what we see in The Witcher 3.
Right.
Not here. They are necrophage. Necrophage goes all the way through to all three games. They occur at night more often. You do often, I remember doing quests where you have to wait till nighttime in order to like fight them or like find them or whatever. And they appear on the banks of ponds, lakes, and rivers, or like in sewers and stuff. Whenever you do some of those missions, they are immune to bleeding, blinding, and poison attempts. They are fearless, and they are immune to stun attempts in the Axii sign.
It's pretty fierce.
Susceptible to silver and to knockdown attempts. The fast style is most effective against drowners. Experienced witchers use the group style against multiple drowners.
In The Witcher 1, you can change your style, your combat styles, which changes your button timing and pressing and stuff. So yeah, depending on the kind of thing you're fighting.
Hopefully it's a bit easier with the remake. They don't have that like super weird complex fighting system.
It's a little antiquated. Yeah, it feels kind of like an old video game kind of trope from like PC games from the 90s.
Yeah. More often than not, you'll find yourself using group style against them because you don't often fight them one-on-one.
Right.
Because their tactics, they usually attack in large groups and take advantage of numerical superiority. So, like one drowner by itself, not much of a threat, but you get a whole swarm of them more often than not, and that could become a problem. And they drop drowner brain tissue, Ginet's acid, and cadaverine.
That's better than Gonad's acid.
There's an I there.
Yeah,
definitely.
Ginet's, yeah. All right, so what's the description in The Witcher 1?
So the drowner, a frightful creature of mud and scum, drags people down into mires and bubbling eddies. It feeds on young women who bathe in rivers, and on occasion will pull men off their horses or carts as they cross a bridge or weir, which is like a low dam, like a lower kind of elevated dam.
So they're looking for opportunities to like get people unaware. So that's what these examples. So somebody bathing who isn't paying attention to the creatures coming up behind them, somebody crossing something on a horse who isn't paying attention, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Drowners arise from the bodies of villains who meet their end in running water or in undertows that appear after storms. These water creatures embody the spirits of those who cannot rest after death and are sometimes born of fetuses aborted by magical means.
Man, this is all over the place. This is a very specific kind of death near water. And then also like babies, like magical
like the same kind as like the botchling or whatever. A little bit similar lore there. They are ugly in appearance, skinny, tall, and bony. Their bodies are slimy and green, as is their hair. Because in The Witcher 1, they actually have hair, which isn't... I don't think that sticks in The Witcher 3. When a drowner steps, pools of their slimy substance form. This creature can be fought using ordinary weapons.
Is Old Greg a drowner? Do you know about Old Greg? You don't. All right, we'll move on.
Okay, cool.
Somebody's going to get the joke.
Locations all over the place, essentially. Outskirts of Vecima, by the fishing village and by the old mill, the Vecima sewers, the dike, the swamp, lakeside on Blackturn Island, and the Naiads bathing spot near the village, and the swamp cemetery.
Yeah, so this is fairly common in The Witcher 1.
And you can find various sources of information because in The Witcher 1, you need to find these sources before you can actually loot some of the items. So there's an old townsman that will tell you a tale about drowned dead in exchange for food. You can spend a bronze talent, which is like the skill points, on the monster lore option, and that adds graveers, ghouls, drowners, and bar guests. And then there's a book called Swamp Monsters.
Swamp Monsters. That was a big hit. That was a big seller back in The Witcher 1. All right, well, let's move on to The Witcher 2. I have a feeling things are going to evolve and change a little bit as we go.
Yeah, so with The Witcher 2, most of the information we have comes from the actual best or journal entry from the game. So sometimes Drowned Man returns as a monster to haunt the living. Tormented with his death, he murders his victims. He prefers to draw them beneath the water's surface, tearing the drowning victim to shreds with sharp claws and eat them like a wet biscuit.
Yum, yum, yum.
Such a creature is called a drowner. They are quite often found at the banks of the Pontar, since the huge river with regular shipping and riverside villages provides them with ample sustenance.
Yeah,
when monsters... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it seems like... I mean, it's kind of just one of those, like, hey, we need something for you to fight in a video game monster go-to things. Like, that's the sense that I have across all three of these games. They're like, well... Like, sometimes they play into the story bits, but not usually. It's more of just like, we need a monster in the environment. So if you happen to be near water, it's probably a drowner.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea that they had whenever they were doing it, was to like, I mean, to have like a minor kind of monster. I mean, in The Witcher 2, you don't even get XP for them past level 13 because they're so like they're a challenge at first, and then after that they're like, you know, they're not a concern anymore. Right. Once you get to higher levels, or not even higher levels, like mid levels. When monsters are really crappy, ganging up makes them happy.
Wait, this is a quote.
Yes, this is a quote.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those things where you like have to like you make a rhyme to have to remember something easier. You know, drowners are not the mightiest beasts in the world, so they hunt in groups in accordance with the above saying. They are surprisingly fast on land, but are a threat only to fishermen and washerwomen.
Again, women bathing. I guess, well, a washerwoman is somebody doing laundry. It's like
doing your laundry, you
right?
Know? They can best a witcher only if he is drunk or in love. Sometimes,
wait,
however, yes, because you let your guard down when you're in love, right?
Or you're in love with the drowner, and then the drowner takes advantage of that.
I don't think that's the case. Like they got a high libido, but I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that bad.
I mean, we just did a dating episode about monsters,
and the drowner was one of them. The drowner.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Sometimes, however, a more robust specimen is found among the drowners. It is called a drowned dead and can command the entire band. Thus, it's best to eliminate it first. One could say that if drowners chatted among themselves, Geralt would be highly esteemed among them after his exploits in Vecima. Yet drowners do not chat. They are dumb like a left shoe. Yes. Very interesting descriptions here.
Right.
I can't remember. I think you had it was a while back, but I think you had like a thing where you were like trying to imagine the person who was writing these journal entries, just like some random dude.
Yeah. Somebody who's just like too full of themselves and like one of the aristocracy who's just trying to be witty in a way that's just like not working, you know?
Yeah. But I'm also like, what's the significance of how dumb a left shoe is? Like,
right.
Is the left shoe dumber than the right shoe?
Right. It sounds like something that like a child would say thinking they were being clever, but it doesn't actually relate to anything. I don't know. That's how it feels.
And good. Fast style should be used when fighting them, and one must spin swiftly before they flee from a witcher's blade. Enough said. As they are already dead, drowners do not fear poisons, and even a large loss of blood makes no impression on them. This ends the list of the monster's strong points, however, as the rest of the Witcher's arsenal is extremely effective against them. Thus, the drowners can be killed with fire, immobilized by traps, knocked down, and above all else, sliced and diced until slime spills from their ears.
Yep,
delicious.
Delicious. All right. Well, that was a much more interesting description, at least.
Yeah. So a little bit more info. They have the variation of the drowned dead, which is like a higher level drowner, not that much higher level though. They occur in wet areas, just any wet areas, immune to poison and bleeding, susceptible to silver swords, fire, knockdown traps. They attack in groups, much like the last game, and you can loot Drowner Brain, Essence of Water, and Drowner Trophy from them. Drowners are among the first monsters to appear in The Witcher 2. Geralt encounters some in the underground passages of the Lavalette Castle on his way to the courtyard. And like I said before, Drowners cease giving XP when killed from level 13 onwards.
Right. But otherwise,
Drowned Dead is level 15 onwards.
It
from
has
what
a
I saw
different
before,
name,
so
basically. Yeah.
Still very, very minor.
Right. It has the same kind of functional use in the games. These just kind of low-level mob enemies that just come at you.
blurry.
You're blurry. Your camera doesn't like you today. All right, so we've got The Witcher 3 now, and we've got a quote from Yannick of Blaviken, a fisherman.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is where you're gonna want to use your voice. So go ahead, buddy.
All right. Well, what was age? You got to be quiet. First of all, not as not to scare the fish. Second, so you don't attract drowners. I'm Yannick of Blaviken, a fisherman. You're still blurry. What is going on with your camera?
I can't do anything here.
Maybe you got to sit higher. I disappeared. Yeah. Okay. Now you're just a blank screen. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how is a drowner different? Now you're sharp again. All right. How is a drowner different in The Witcher 3 than in previous Witchers?
A drowner resembles a corpse dredged from the bottom of a pond. It is sickly blue or green in color, with slime and sludge oozing out of every pore and the acrid stench of rot wafting off of it.
This is the first time we've got a stench description. Yep, although the other bits are... and it's not only slime and sludge oozing, but out of every pore. That's even more descriptive than previously.
Yep. That is why it is often thought drowners, along with their more dangerous cousins, vodniks, mucknixers, and drowned dead, arise from the bodies of those who drown in shallow water.
I'm going to call somebody a mucknixer. Next time I get upset, like somebody cuts me off in a car, I'm going to yell at the window, "You mucknixer! What are you Get off the road." That's a good one. That's a good, because they're going to be like, "What'd you call me?" I'm going to be like, "A mucknixer."
I don't know. That's just,
it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable
so
for me.
Bad. It sounds so bad though.
Yeah. Mucknixer.
Anyways, lost travelers falling into bogs, children who swim too far from the shore, or in the case of vodniks, inebriated peasants who stumble off narrow swamp trails. Like so many other beliefs about monsters, this one is false. While drowners do look like humans from a distance, witchers who have the dubious pleasure of examining them from close quarters have reported the numerous ways in which their anatomy differs from our own. Their scaly skin, gills, and dorsal fins suggest drowners, and their like are an entirely foreign species.
Yeah, we get a lot of that. Like if you actually look at the models in The Witcher 3, they have much more fish-like qualities, like the fins and the different, I don't know, even kind of scaly looking skin.
Yeah. So there's obvious like a change from the idea of it from like The Witcher 1 progressing into, because they did they were definitely more human, and just like they had hair and stuff before, but they kind of changed it to make them more like solidly not this.
Right.
Where was I even? The adaptations mentioned below make drowners excellent swimmers, well suited to the muddy waters of the ponds and lakes in which they dwell. They often cluster near human settlements, which are for them an excellent source of food.
Totally makes sense. They're not there because that's where the dead people came from. They're there because that's their food source.
Cowardly creatures by nature, they usually stick to eating scraps they dig out of rubbish piles and animal carcasses. Yet if a lone traveler or careless fisherman strays into their territory, they turn from scavengers to fearsome predators. They can attack with lightning speed, taking their victim by surprise and pulling him into the water to drown. If not particularly hungry at the moment, they will keep their prey under the water for a few days, aging it until it grows deliciously tender and rotten.
Like a wet biscuit.
Like a wet biscuit.
Yeah.
Drowners are particularly active at dusk and during the night, especially if the rain is falling. At such times, they will even leave their watery homes and venture inland. Drowners, mucknixers, vodniks, and drowned dead all live in putrid, rotting filth, and so have developed a high resistance to poison. Though humanoid in form, they are primitive creatures no more intelligent than carp or pike.
Okay. That is, like a fish.
That is why, yeah.
Yeah.
That is why spells affecting the mind, the Axii side included, are ineffective against them, yet they are particularly vulnerable to magic drawn from the element of fire, including the Igni side.
You know what? You can see the development of the series over time because, and maybe this is me just reading into it, but when it talks about them preying on people, it does not speak gender. It does not talk about like gendered roles. It simply says lone travelers or careless fishermen. And fishermen is a general term. It doesn't just mean male fishers. It's anybody who fishes, right? So so it's interesting to see that, like, we're not talking about women doing laundry or bathing themselves in this one. It's just anybody near water who happens to be alone or vulnerable.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
In the course of class and necrophage, their variations, like I said before, Drowned Dead and Mucknixer, they occur in Novigrad, Skellige, Toussaint, Velen, and White Orchard, or literally everywhere. Susceptible to necrophage oil and igni. They drop Drowner Brain, Drowner Tongue, Monster Blood, Monster Bone, Monster Heart, Monster Hair, Monster Saliva, Monster Tooth, and Water Essence.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. The loot is a lot more fleshed out monster flesh in The Witcher 3 because of the uses of it in potions and things have expanded from the previous games. All right, so if you're going to fight a Drowner, especially in The Witcher 3, what tactics should we use?
So Drowners are, like previously stated, predominantly pack creatures by nature, usually in groups of 3 or greater. You know they have spotted you if they burrow into the ground. This is a sure warning sign that they're preparing to ambush you if you encroach further on their territory. Drowners' leaping attacks cannot be parried or countered. Attempting to do so will momentarily stagger Geralt and render him immobile for several seconds, often enough for other Drowners to land attacks on him. Their normal clawing attacks, on the other hand, are susceptible to counterattacks, but doing so when multiple Drowners are landing hits simultaneously could be dangerous.
So if they jump at you, roll out of the way.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can parry their attacks.
Yes. Drowners can evade normal and sweeping Ard rather effectively, and the only moment they can really be hit with the sign is during a very small window in the middle of the leaping attack animation, or if immobilized in some way. Axii, on the other hand, is often too slow to stun them, even when cast without interruption. Not, like you said before, not very effective. Drowners are quite weak to igni, susceptible to being lit afire and stunned while they screech in agony. When attacked by multiple Drowners, it is possible to catch the pack in a Yrden trap, then blast the Drowners with igni. You can counterattack the claw swipes from a Drowner, causing a bit of extra damage to them.
Right. However, so lure them in and then cook them up like fish.
Pretty much. However, this can be quite difficult when multiple Drowners are attacking. Not only do they usually attack in numbers, their attacks are quite fast and have a surprising range, as they usually do leaping jump strikes. Above all else, don't let yourself get surrounded by them. And this is like, you get into like kind of the later stuff or whatever, you just like one-shotting Drowners. But like at the start, like I just remember like you walk down by it could be a problem. It could be a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can interrupt your counterattacks with their own attacks. Drowners try to leap at a Witcher from beneath the ground. Watch for disturbances at your feet and roll or dodge to safety. Drowners react to the deaths of their fellows by screaming in pain. This show of mourning leaves them defenseless for several seconds.
Yeah, now I don't think there's like a telepathic thing where they can feel the other ones being killed or hurt. I think it's more of they're pack creatures. And so the loss of part of their family unit is emotionally distressing to them.
It's still interesting because it's like with how the emphasis on like how like mentally or not, like there's a word that I want to say and my brain doesn't want me to say.
Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to say.
Mentally, like their amount of mental progression. They're not very intelligent.
They're not
creatures.
intelligent.
They've
right.
said that they're like very like they have the intelligence of like an animal.
Right.
And like normally animals don't have this, like some of them they don't have that same like level of empathy or like emotional attachment to other animals.
Right.
Obviously we'd get humans get to experience it more with like dogs and cats and like,
mammals tend to be more emotionally intelligent than say reptiles or fish.
Yeah. But like, you put like a dead fish into a tank with other fish and they're going to eat the fish because it's food. Like they don't have that same level of like, oh, this is one of our kind.
Right.
Like they just, act instinctively rather than like emotionally. So it's interesting that they have like an emotional reaction to the loss of another one at like the level of intelligence that they've like stated that they are at. So
yeah, totally makes sense. All right, well, let's take a break. We're gonna do the mid break, thank our patrons, and then we're gonna come back and talk about some real world mythology that may have influenced the development of the drowners in this world. So don't go anywhere.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
All right, we've got our patrons to thank. We don't have any new patrons this week, but we do have to shout out our higher vampires, Ben of Temeria and Jared M, and remind everybody that our new t-shirts and sticker designs are now up on the Patreon. So if you are already a tier 3 patron, then in the next 3 months, you'll get the first sticker. And then every 3 months after that, you get the next sticker for all 4 for the year. And if you're a tier 4 or higher, then you get t-shirts. But we've upgraded it because Patreon doesn't have an easy way to close out the previous year and let people who were collecting the first series continue finishing that first series. So the first series is turned off and then the new series is turned on, which is kind of a bummer. So to offset the bummer, we're giving you guys a hoodie, a hoodie sweatshirt with the first design, and the designs are really cool. They're based off of the Witcher schools, and it's just black and white and really stark and cool looking. So go check them out on the Patreon, patreon.com/Witcher Lorecast. Check out the different tiers. See if you'd like to help support the show. We'd really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our patrons for your support. Also, we've got this big new review that came in. Just a reminder, if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we'll read it out on a future episode of the show. This one is from Jeff Polk 1 in the United States, who wrote us a little bit of a book, but we're going to read it out because it is so nice, and that's what we do. This says, finally, a lore podcast for everyone. I am by no means someone who fits in with the general category of nerd culture. I am more of an outdoorsy type of person. I only casually play video games as something to do in the winter. I am still not 100% sure what Twitch actually is for. Yeah, me either. To be honest, I don't even really like podcasts, usually. I first got into the Witcher TV show as a way to bond with my little brother, who is on the spectrum, and I quickly became obsessed with the Witcher universe. I just finished The Last Wish, and started Sword of Destiny today. I'm also playing The Witcher 3 on my Nintendo Switch, and I'm loving every minute of it. Wrapping up the Heart of Stone DLC right now and having such a great time. I stumbled across this podcast while trying to find something to listen to as I do some major construction on my house and have been binging hours and hours of this absolutely amazing show for weeks. The Witcher Lorecast dissects some really complex information about the Witcher world in a way that is fun and lighthearted, while still bringing up some great points and asking thought-provoking questions. The podcast works as a perfect supplement to any form of Witcher content that you are currently consuming. And don't worry, they give fair warning before disclosing spoilers. But what's even more amazing is the hosts Tom and Toasty have been working to foster this incredible culture that is so inviting to everyone who is interested in the Witcher world and are looking to hear more. There is no sense of elitism, gatekeeping, or other toxic traits that I've come across whenever I show the slightest interest in any type of fandom. Those two have successfully built a loving community of people who have found commonality and just want to have fun discussing something they are all interested in, the world of The Witcher. Thank you guys so much for providing such a welcoming atmosphere for so many different types of people to learn more about this diverse world and for giving me more ways to bond with my brother. All the best. Keep doing what you're doing. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that review. That and I mean, I think he totally gets it, Toasty. We're trying to, like, I think you and I and many of the other hosts on the network we're just not into gatekeeping community stuff, fandoms. If you love a thing, love a thing. We love that you love that thing too, regardless of if you're brand new to it or you've been into it for years or whatever. There's no like certain level of depth in order to become a real fan or any of that crap. So, Jeff, thank you so much for that. I'm glad that you are noticing that, and it's very intentional. So,
I was about to say no nonsense. I was like, no, that's just not true. There's a lot of nonsense on this podcast.
That was me because words are hard. Words are hard. Words is hard. So let's move on with the rest of the show. Here we go.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
All right, Toasty. So what kinds of real world influences or mythology have you come across for Drowners?
So, Let's Not's probably going to be pretty happy about this one because I know that they're a particular fan of this one. From what I could find, generally, and it's actually a very interesting because we look up Drowner, it doesn't really have much significance to to actual like mythology or whatever. But luckily, like they were nice enough in like the description to put like the other names that they're referred to as, Vodnik being one of them. And a Vodnik is an actual specific thing in like Slavic mythology, with a very interesting counterpart, the Vodyanoi, in like a kind of different. It's like a weird, like, I think the Vodnik is like Eastern Slavic, as opposed to like it was kind of confusing, I will say, to like kind of pick out exactly where it's from. But anyways, we're going to start with the Vodyanoi. So the Vodyanoi, and which I believe is also in The Witcher 1, so a similar thing, is said to appear as a naked old man with a frog's face, a greenish beard and long hair, with his body covered in algae and mud, usually covered in black fish scales.
I can see why this is Let's Not's favorite.
All right, then. He has webbed feet instead of hands, a fishtail, and eyes that burn like hot embers. Usually he rides along the river on a half-sunken log, making heavy splashes. Consequently, he is often called a grandfather or ancestor by local people. The local drownings are said to be the work of the Vodyanoi or Rusalkas. When he gets angry, the Vodyanoi breaks levees, floods, mills, and drowns people and animals. Consequently, fishermen, millers, and also beekeepers make sacrifices to calm him down. He frequently drags people into his underwater dwelling to serve him as slaves.
Wow. Quite a jerk, grandfather.
Yeah.
So this is like cursed ancestors that get mad, and as with many of these things, it becomes an explanation for some of the things that you don't have explanations for in the old world. So, why did the levee break? Or why is the flood happening? Oh, grandfather, our ancestors are mad at us. Right. That kind of thing.
And then, yes. So specifically, the Vodyanoi is Eastern Slavic, like, folklore mythology. And then there is its counterpart, the Vodnik. So in Czech, Slovenian, and Slavic folklore, the characteristics of the Vodnik are markedly different from the Slavic Eastern conception. He has a completely human build and habits, save for a few differences. Vodnici, which is the plural, have gills, a membrane between their fingers, and their skin is algae green, as is their hair, which is typically pale green in tone.
So more fish-like, like we see in The Witcher 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
His dress and general appearance are strange, sometimes even tramp-like, patchwork shirts, and by modern standards, weird hats.
Okay, by modern standards, weird hats.
Yeah.
Okay. But at least these have clothing.
Yes.
There is that.
They can bear to stay for hours outside their ponds. When they do, they can be unmistakably distinguished by their damp coat layers from which the water is dripping under all circumstances. Vodnik's face is generally unshaven, and it is not uncommon for a Vodnik to have a large, wet, tangled beard. Czech, Slovenian, and Slavic tales have wicked and good vodnici that sometimes try to drown people when they swim in their territory. Vodnici keep the souls of the drowned in covered porcelain cups.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice.
So you get some of the weird stuff in here.
Oh, man, that's cool.
They regard their mugs as the most valuable heirloom and display their work and number these mugs, which they see as proportionate to their wealth or status among other vodnici. When the lid is removed from said cup, the soul inside will escape and be released. Except for fish or fish spirits, they have no servants. Otherwise, vodnici spend their time running their territory or playing cards, smoking pipes, or just sitting on the surface of the water on rocks or nearby willows and wandering.
I hope they have like waterproof cards. Like, imagine if you played a pack of cards and you're like, it explains how they're dripping wet all the time, even when they're out of the water. Like, they're like old guys that just hang out and collect souls in little jars. And then they prize them, and then we've got little fish servants or fish spirit servants. Mm-hmm. And then they play cards and just hang out and smoke.
Yeah. The fishermen ask the vodnik for help by placing a pinch of tobacco in the water and saying, "Here is your tobacco, Mr. Vodnik. Now give me a fish."
I love... So sometimes when you get like quotes like this, they're, I don't know, fancier. And this one is just like right to the point. "Here is your tobacco, Mr. Vodnik. Give me a fish." Straight to the point.
Mm-hmm. In Czech, Slavic, and Slovenian tales, vodnici live in ponds or rivers. They do not have a particular home. There are almost no references to vodnici in relation to seawater, which is supposed to be dangerous or even deadly for them.
So that's very different, because we have drowners in seawater in The Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
So distinctly different.
Yeah. So there's like quite a few things, getting into the very weird, interesting, like mythology aspect of these things. So some of the powers that they can have, they are considered the master of the waters, but although they are endowed with terrible strength and power in the water, they are often weak on dry land. And of course, these are differing things here. So some of this, aligns or doesn't align with, the previous explanations. All that happens in the waters is done by their will. When in good humor, he drives the fish into the fisherman's net and guides sailors to safe places in stormy weather. But when his mood is irritable, he lures them to dangerous coasts and upsets their boats.
So it acts like a water spirit in some of these old mythologies. It less of maybe a creature that lives in the water and more of a spirit of the water that is there to help or to hinder and is as wild as the water and the weather can be. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tears the spikes out of the mill wheels, diverts the water from its course, and floods the mill. And if the miller wishes to succeed, he should bury some living being in the foundations of his mill, such as a cow, a sheep, or even a man. Yeah. If you want to please and don't have your mill flooded,
hey Ralph,
bury something.
Ralph, you drew the short straw, buddy. We got to bury you under the mill. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just everybody agrees, right? Everybody, yeah, Ralph's the one. Yep, sorry, Ralph. Got to bury you.
That's always Ralph. There's also widespread belief that the vodnik drowns those who bathe at midday or at midnight. Generally lies at the bottom of deep pools, but at night he sits on the shore combing his hair, or he sports in the water, diving with the splash and coming a far away. Sometimes also he fights with the wood sprites, the noise of their combats being heard far off.
It's freaking wood sprites.
Yeah. This is one of the weirder ones. When on land, Vodyanoi like to visit markets. The appearance foretells the price of corn. If he buys dear, there will be a bad harvest. If cheap, a good crop may be expected.
So he's
the more he pays for the corn, the worse the crop will be.
All right, so he's kind of like a groundhog predicting winter. but he's a scaly, slimy old water man who wanders into the market and then makes up his own price to buy the corn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wait, isn't corn an American? This story must have come after trade and settling in the Americas. That's weird. I would have expected like grains of some other types of grains than corn, like wheat or something. Huh.
Something.
Yeah. Weird.
He likes to ride a sheatfish or saddles a horse, bull, or cow, which he rides till it falls dead.
Okay.
Yeah, these are just casual things. Some of the sacrifices that are made, like said before, there's the mill where you have to bury something beneath it in order to appease it. Millers and peasants also cross themselves before swimming or stepping into the water to bathe, just in case the Vaginoi was angry and tried to drown them.
So cross themselves, as in do the sign of the cross, like a Catholic or Orthodox Christian would do. And so that shows that this is from a time when you have the combination of Christianity and these old world myths blending together, which you see a lot in even like Grimm's fairy tales and stuff like that, like the original ones. Let's get this weird mix of that stuff.
One of the weirder things for like sacrifices you can make, the Vodnik is a patron of beekeeping.
Yeah, they mentioned bees earlier. I guess they like honey.
Something. It is customary to enclose the first swarm of the year in a bag and throw it, weighted with a stone, into the nearest river as an offering to him.
Oh man. You know how much ancient and old world people probably wasted just stuff on like burnt offerings and throwing bags of stuff and like to appease the nature spirits or whatever? There's probably a ton of crap they did and they just threw it out.
No. You can also, it would also be more beneficial for the beekeeper if they were to take a honeycomb from a hive on St. Zosima's Day and fling it at midnight into a mill stream.
Okay.
Very specific.
Because it wasn't enough to bury Ralph under the mill.
It wasn't. It really wasn't.
You got to do more.
As other offerings of, like he would tear fish nets because he didn't like the fish being captured. You could offer him a goose in the middle of September. You would bury a horse's head beneath a dam in order to ensure that it wouldn't destroy the dam. This one's one of the really weird ones.
Okay.
In order to appease him and get his goodwill, the peasants in some places would buy a horse, which they would feed well for 3 days, then tie its legs together, smear its head with honey, adorn its mane with red ribbons, attach 2 millstones to its neck, and at midnight fling it into an ice hole, or if the frost is broken up, into the middle of a river.
That's very, very, very specific.
It's very specific. Yeah. Also, like, these peasants, they be working hard. I'm sure they getting jacked. It's still, I don't think you could get like a number of peasants that like could obviously like, because if you get too many, then you don't have the space in order to lift it. Who's flinging horses?
Right. Yeah, no, that's
horses are big
horses heavy. Well, you get like a dozen of the men from the local village to try to pick up a dead horse and throw it. Also, horses are expensive. Like the horse, that was their means of travel. It was a means of work. It pulled plows. Like you don't just get rid of a horse, willy nilly.
Yeah, wow. I don't. That seems very. It's very specific. And then there's, of course, many interactions that like to do like play pranks on people by like reviving corpses that people would pull from the river,
of course,
in order to scare them. Chasing ducks into the water. Again, like it would ride horses to death just for fun.
Yeah, it's another one of those myth things where it's like, why did the horse die? I don't know, Mom. Maybe it was the Vodnik got it. you know, like explaining things that they either wanted to explain away or needed an explanation for because they didn't understand what actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of just crazy, ridiculous things, as would be expected.
Yeah, that's pretty great. That's some good stuff. All right, so that's the foundation of Drowner. Any other details here you want to share?
You know, there's some listings of how like they'd have various different kinds of like make like families or whatever. Like they'd be married to like water nymphs that were
cross monster.
Marriage. There was like a specific like instance or situation where they like gave birth to Rusalkas. It's just a lot of like wild stuff. Just mythology stuff.
That's great. That's great. I love all the crazy wild mythology stuff. Well, that's cool. That's cool that this one has, I mean, in some ways it's very similar and stays pretty true to the original, and yet in other ways became much more, I don't know, fleshed out, especially as the games moved on. So there's that. Very cool.
And there's
stuff.
Also instances of information where they were friends with it's Botniks, which were like them but swamp variations, and Leshies.
Oh,
which I mean, there's a lot of similarities between them and the Leshies if you remember that episode. So
somebody needs to do like a spin-off series of like all the monsters being like bros and like hanging out with each other, and the Witchers being like the bad guys who keep messing with them, but they're just like want to be left alone and do their monster things. I could totally see that. Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Where are we going next week? What do you think? We're going back to some kingdoms and stuff?
Yeah. Politics. It might finally be time to get to Redania.
So, yeah. That's a big one.
And we kind of made it around the map, and now we're finally back up to the top. So,
yeah. Well, cool. You got anything else you want to share before we head out?
Check out the Cyberpunk Lorecast if you're a fan of Cyberpunk and Cyberpunk related stuff. We're kind of doing a similar thing over there, going around the world of Cyberpunk, the different like
different zones in Night City.
Yeah, different like
or other
countries
places.
And nations. We're actually going around the world right now. Nice. We recently did an episode interview with Jay Gray talking about the new Black Chrome book that just came out. A lot of fun stuff going on over there.
Nice.
And then again, Cyberpunk related. If you're a fan, check out the Cyberpunk Red Actual Play podcast, Cyberpunk apostrophe D, that I do with the Fumbling for and Almighty Crit Gang.
Awesome. Yeah, go check that stuff out. And you can find those shows and my other shows over on robotsradio.net. Of course, I've got the Lord of the Rings Lorecast and Fallout and Elder Scrolls and Mass Effect and Starfield, which we're still waiting for a launch date on, which maybe we'll get it this week. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, go check out all that stuff if you're looking for more content. And thank you to everybody who tunes in. Thank you for everybody who's in the chat. And we got lots of first-time chatters and new people jumping in to say hi. Welcome, everybody. So glad you are here. And we'll be back same time next week. So we'll see you next time. Until then,
stay safe on the path.
See you guys later. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.